So now we have our management packs imported to monitor Oracle and VMware, and so we're getting all these nice alerts, and we see how our environment is doing, which is pretty neat. But the thing is, there are different people who need different information. You know, admins or IT pros, they typically want to know alert information if something is broken so they can fix it, or you know, how something is doing it. So, but you also have decision makers and managers basically who need to make decisions on their environment, and they need a different type of information, maybe more general. So what you can do for them is create reports, for instance, or have line of business applications so they kind of have a bird's eye view of what's happening in their environment. So this is also why I actually want to show you how some of the reports work. There are pre-canned reports in the management pack already, of course, and you can use the generic reporting library. But if you want to take it a step further, then you can make your own reports. And I think it's actually easier than most people think. It might look very hard, but there are so many resources out there on the internet now which will help you do that. And it's just a few steps actually to create a report, which is actually pretty fancy. So let's do that. So we'll go back to Operations Manager. First of all, we can see that we have some reports in here. Well, we have an Oracle General Report, which we can run. And we'll choose the time and the instance. Well, I think we'll choose 5 today. And we can see basically all the metrics for this report. And we can see this one has been online has been healthy for 82% of the time it's monitored, and 18% is unmonitored. Now below, there's also some statistics which are shown, so the number of disk sorts and stuff. And org admins, they tend to want to know these metrics the most if they're looking for problems in the server. They're good to know. But you know, maybe you want a different report. Maybe you want to report over something like a table space, or you know, the amount of space the table space would take in on the OS, or the growth. Well, we can do that, and we can do that pretty simply by going to the reporting server, and I already opened the window here. So basically, when we go to localhost reports, because everything is installed on the same server here, and I'll show you. That is just a simple URL, so it's this one. We see all the reports which are already available in Operations Manager. So these actually correlate with the reports we see in the reporting tree here. So what we can do is build a new report if we'd like. So we start Report Builder. And let's be daring, let's start with a blank report instead of using a wizard. Now we get a blank report in front of us. And let me just clean this up a bit, so we might delete this. You know, we don't really need the execution time, we don't really need a footer. We can keep the title. Let's see. Oh, okay. Move it around a bit. We can call it table space used megabytes. We can put this in parentheses if we like. And let's expand the canvas a little bit. So now we have a blank report, which is called table space used MB. Well, the first thing we need to do is make a connection to our data warehouse database. So we do that with a data source. So we click Add Data Source. And we give it a logical name, so we would call it Data Warehouse. And we'll create the connection embedded in my report, so it's contained in the report itself. Of course, we use Microsoft SQL Server, and then we build the connection string to the server on which the data warehouse is hosted. So let's open the browse window, or the drop-down box. And the server, which our data warehouse is hosted on, is called SCOM 2012 R2. So we'll click that one, and when we have this drop-down box, we can also see that we have Operations Manager DW, so the data warehouse. So we select that one. We'll just use Windows authentication because SCOM already uses Windows authentication, so the people who have their appropriate rights to view the report already have that. So we'll click OK. We'll test the connection. It's successful, so we know we can go ahead. And we'll click OK again. So now we have our data source. Now we really have to think about, how do we want to get this data out of the data warehouse? So we need some sort of SQL query for that, and we need that for our table space used megabytes. Now, to think of it on the spot is a bit much, so I pre-canned one. This one, dataset performance. And what you can see here is we have a SQL query, and it might look a bit daunting at first, but all it really does, it collects a few metrics, and what we try to do is, first of all, we are interested in the counter name for the table space used megabytes, and the object name is the Oracle table spaces, and we're interested to do this between the dates October 10th, 2014 and October 23rd. So we can change this as well in the query later on, but let's just run it like this, and we can see what it does. So first what we're going to do is create a new data set in which we're going to place the query. So we'll call it dataset performance, and again we'll use a dataset embedded in my report. Now we already have the data source which we created previously, so we're going to use that for the connection to the database, and then we're just going to insert the query into the query box. Now we can open the query designer. And we can run the query to see what results we might get. And you can see basically the results the query produces are path. So we can see that we have our different databases here, the instance name, which is basically the table space name, the counter name, which we were after, which you can already see here, which we filtered for, so table space used megabytes, the object name, the date the sample was taken, and of course the thing we're most interested in, the sample itself, of how big or how many MBs this particular table space was taking up. So once we're satisfied with that query, well, maybe it's the 30th today, so we'll change that it's a bit actual, and we'll click OK. And we'll click OK again. And now we see in our data set, we can actually return these kind of results. So path, instance name, counter name, object name. So these are all the return rows which we're getting from our query. So we have the information. Now we actually want to create a graph in our report. And that is actually one of the most satisfying things to do always, which I think. So we'll go ahead and take a chart and click the chart wizard. Now as you can see, if we're creating a new chart, we already have our dataset performance available to us, so it's very nice. We can take our information from there. Click next. Now we can choose what kind of graph we would like to add. Well, in this example, I'm going to use a line graph because it would make the most sense. So we'll click next on that. And this is always the part which I find most challenging in the whole reporting, is to which box do you drag which value? Well, I think the values one is pretty easy. So we'll drag the average value to the value box, because these are basically all the samples we're taking from the data warehouse database. And just to spy, we drag our date time to the categories. So basically we want our date time to be on the horizontal axis of our graph. So we have, we know basically when, which data point occurred. But we also want to group our results in different lines. So we have many table spaces. So these are different series. So when we take our instance name, we group these in series by instance name. And we'll see the result later on. Now for this you can choose kind of pre-canned styles of chart. Usually I just take the generic one because it's the cleanest and you have the most visible information. Expand that a bit. And we can go ahead and give it a test run. So as you can see, we have all the table spaces here. We have our date and time on the horizontal axis. We have our MBs here on the vertical axis for the different type of table, for all the different table spaces there are. There are quite a lot of them, so it's not too organized in the graph. So later on we can see how to filter that. But so now we want to insert this report into Operations Manager. Well, that's actually not too hard to do. The first thing we have to do is create a folder in the reporting server. So we click New Folder, and I'll call it Custom Reports. Okay. So we have that here now, and when we go back to Operations Manager, you'll see that when we refresh this, we have custom reports in this tree as well. I'll just do that. But it's still empty, so we still have to insert the report into the custom reports folder. And one thing is, if you just save it to your report server, then it won't show up. You always have to put it into a folder, because if you save it into the root, you'll never see the report. So that's one thing to keep in mind. So what we'll do is save the report as, and as you can see here, we already have the URL to our report server, so that's nice and easy. So we double click this, and we want to save it in our custom reports folder, and let's give it a name. We'll call it Oracle Table Space. So we'll save that. And now when we refresh this view, we see we have an Oracle Table Space report. Now we can double click this, it runs immediately, and it renders pretty nicely. So that's one thing. Now the thing is, basically we want the report to be a bit dynamic. I mean, this is pretty static. We have static dates in them. So that's not very much use to us. I mean, if you would publish this report in something, in a portal or something, or give people access to it, they'll pretty much always see the same report with the same dates. So that's not much use. So basically we want to make the date and time variable. And the way we can do that is go back to the report builder, and we can adjust our data sets a little bit. Now what we're going to do, we're going to create some parameters. So basically things we can change, or you can call them variables, but in report builder they call them parameters. And how we create them is, first we go to the query of our data set. And you can see we have a fixed date here, but we'll make the parameter, so it's a SQL parameter, start, date, and we'll create this one, the end date, into the parameter end date.
And we'll click OK. And what you'll notice is once you've done that, Report Builder will have added these two parameters automatically. Now there's one more thing we have to do. We have to check the parameter properties, because basically these are of the type text, and what we're trying to do is we're trying to enter a date. So all we have to do is select date time on the drop down box for both of them, click OK. Same for that one. And let's save this again. So now when we go back to Operations Manager and click the report, we actually get a start date and an end date. So now when we do this, we can go back a few days or a month or something like that and report over that. So we can run the report, and we have the different dates which we wanted to have. So that's already better, but you know, I still think my report is pretty clogged. I mean, I have all my table spaces in here, and I would like to filter my table spaces. So that's the last thing we're going to do in this report. So we'll go back to our report builder. And basically the thing we have to do is we have to list all the table spaces which we have in our data warehouse for these particular instances. Now, the way we're going to do that is we're going to add another data set. Basically, we're going to add one more data set, so which is only a query really, which returns all the table spaces which we're interested in. So we'll go to data sets, add a new one. And we'll call it instance names. And again, we'll use a data set embedded in my report. We'll use the data warehouse. Data source. And I've also created a query for this one already, so the dataset instance name. And I'll copy that one, and basically let me quickly explain what this one does. This one just does the same as the previous dataset, but this one lists all the distinct table spaces in our data warehouse. So we can see we want all the table spaces where the rule is table space used MB, and then also where the object name is Oracle table spaces, and we want all the distinct names of the instance name. So we'll copy that, paste it in here, go into the query designer just to see what it does, and just to show you, give you a quick show, is like all it does, it just creates a list of all the available table spaces we have in our environment. So we'll click OK, OK. Now, we have to make our performance dataset variable also, so we'll go back here and edit this query a little bit. And in this one, we'll type another clause, which is and v and we'll create a new parameter which is called instance name, which we can use. Okay?
I think you have a misspelling of instance name.
You're right, thanks. So that should be alright. Okay. So you'll see the instance name parameters added. We'll edit this one. And now we'll check the box, allow multiple values, because there are more instance names we can choose. And when we go to the available values, we'll specify that we'll get the value from a query, which we just made, and the data set is instance names, which we just made here. The value field we want is instance name, same for the label field. Click OK. Now we'll save everything, and if I didn't misspell anything else, then it should work. So again, now we've made a box down here, so we can select the table spaces we're interested in. Now usually I made a few which I changed some stuff on and which are pretty high use, so table space 1 and 2. And we'll go back a little bit in time here. Click run, and you see we'll only do it for 2.